Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're a Florida educator stepping up to take the FELE, the Florida Educational Leadership Examination, you are in exactly the right place. I am so thrilled to be your mentor today. We're going to master the legal and ethical foundations of educational leadership. But here's the real secret to this exam, and honestly, to being a phenomenal principal. We're not just going to sit here and memorize dry facts. No way. We're going to understand the why behind the law. Every single policy we cover today exists for a very specific reason: to protect our students, empower our parents, and support our teachers. So, here is our roadmap for the session. Number 1, special education and 504 plans. 2, supporting English language learners. 3, student rights and discipline. 4, parent and employee legal rights. And 5, ethics, liability, and safety.
All right, let's dive right into Section 1, special education and 504 plans.
To make sure this actually sticks, we're going to use real classroom scenarios today, kind of like what you'll see on the exam. So, imagine you're walking into Miss Rodriguez's science class. Her students are learning about all 13 body systems. Sophia gets extended time and larger print for her test. Mateo, on the other hand, is only required to study 5 body systems instead of the full 13. I want you to pause for a second, lock in your answer. Which of these is an accommodation and which is a modification? Okay, so Sophia is getting an accommodation, while Mateo is getting a modification. A really simple trick to remember this: accommodations change how students learn, while modifications change what students learn. Sophia still has to learn all 13 body systems, right? She's just taking a slightly different road to get to the exact same destination. Mateo, though, his expectations were changed. He literally has a totally different destination. As a leader, you've got to make sure your teachers know this difference inside and out, because these are legally binding documents. And hey, remember, a 504 plan only offers accommodations for equal access, but an IEP under IDEA, that can offer both accommodations and modifications. Now, before a student even gets an IEP, schools have to proactively find the kids who might need help. This legal requirement is known as child find. But listen, we don't just immediately rush to a special education referral. In Florida, we use a multi-tiered system of support, or MTSS. Tier 1 is that solid, high-quality instruction for everybody. If a student struggles there, they move to Tier 2 for small group interventions. Still struggling? Then it's Tier 3 for intensive, individualized support. This whole response to intervention process ensures we aren't over-identifying kids for special ed when maybe they just needed slightly better instruction or a bit more targeted practice. Moving right along to Section 2, supporting our English language learners, specifically looking at the Florida Consent Decree. In Florida, the civil rights of our ELL students are protected under this massive legal agreement called the Florida Consent Decree. Basically, it guarantees they get instruction they can actually understand. So, here's another scenario for you. You've got a 4th grade ELL student who has worked incredibly hard and just scored proficient on their English language assessment. Awesome, right? But do they automatically exit the ESOL program? What score on the state reading assessment do they actually need? A level 2, a level 3, or do they not need a score at all? Think about it for a second. Well, they actually need a level 3 or higher. Yep, for grades 3 through 9 in Florida, just being proficient in conversational English isn't enough to exit the program. They have to pass that state reading assessment with at least a level 3. To help get them there, Florida uses the 5 WIDA standards. If you want a quick way to memorize these for the exam, just use the acronym SILMS. It stands for Social and Instructional Language, the Language of Language Arts, the Language of Mathematics, the Language of Science, and the Language of Social Studies. Okay, here's something you definitely need to know. Strict legal timelines pop up on the FELE all the time, so you'll want to lock these numbers in right now. If you issue an out-of-school suspension, you have exactly 24 hours to notify the parents in writing. 24 hours. If a parent or teacher requests a reevaluation for an ELL student, the school has 30 days to assess them. And when an ELL student finally does exit the ESOL program, we don't just wave goodbye and forget about them. You absolutely must monitor their academic progress for 2 solid years. All right, Section 3, student rights and discipline. It's all about balancing campus safety with student rights. As a school leader, you are constantly walking a tightrope. You have to maintain a safe, orderly campus, but you absolutely have to protect student rights. The Supreme Court famously said that students do not shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate. So, here's a classic Fourth Amendment scenario. You're the principal. A teacher sends a student down to the office, and you can clearly smell marijuana on them. Do you need full-blown police-level probable cause to search that student's backpack? Or do you just need reasonable suspicion? How do you balance their privacy with the school's safety? As a school leader, you only need reasonable suspicion. The smell of marijuana? That's a concrete fact, not just a rumor, which gives you the legal right to search. That comes directly from the Supreme Court case, New Jersey v. TLO. Actually, let me give you a really specific trick to remember the 3 biggest court cases on the exam. Tinker equals talking. That's freedom of speech, assuming it doesn't cause a substantial disruption. TLO equals locker. That's your right to search based on reasonable suspicion. And Goss equals give your side. That's the 14th Amendment right to due process, meaning before you suspend a kid, you have to let them tell their side of the story. Now things get a little trickier when you're disciplining a student with an IEP. If you're looking at a change in placement, or if that student has been suspended for more than 10 cumulative days, you are legally required to hold an MDR, a manifestation determination review. This essentially asks 2 big questions. 1, did the student's disability cause the behavior? And 2, did the school fail to implement the IEP? If the answer to either of those is yes, you cannot punish the student in the traditional way. Let's pivot now to Section 4, Parent and Employee Legal Rights, Trust and Professional Boundaries. A truly great school is built on trust, confidentiality, and very clear professional boundaries. So let's talk about FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. This is the law that gives parents the right to review educational records. Imagine an angry parent storms into your office. They are demanding to see a teacher's personal, handwritten notes about their child's behavior. Notes that the teacher has literally never shared with anyone else. Are those notes considered official educational records under FERPA? The answer is no, they aren't. This perfectly highlights the difference between educational records and sole possession notes. Educational records are things like grades, discipline reports, attendance. Parents absolutely have a legal right to see those under FERPA. But sole possession notes, those are just personal memory aids kept exclusively by the teacher. Because they aren't shared, they aren't official records. That being said, as a leader, your main goal in that moment is to de-escalate and build trust. Protecting the confidentiality of real records is a huge part of maintaining that trust with your families. So, what about your teachers' rights? Teachers are public employees, which means they still have First Amendment rights to free speech and association, plus whistleblower protections if they ever need to report unethical conduct. But it's not a free-for-all. The landmark case, Pickering v. Board of Education, established a balancing act. Yes, teachers have rights, but school districts are perfectly allowed to establish reasonable expectations regarding professional conduct. Ethical leadership means making sure your entire staff clearly understands where that boundary lies. And finally, we arrive at Section 5, Ethics, Liability, and Safety. Because safety always comes first. Look, everything we do as educators takes a back seat to our ethical and legal duty to keep our kids physically and emotionally safe. Let's look at a liability scenario. A teacher steps out of their classroom to take a quick personal phone call in the hallway. They leave the kids totally unsupervised. In those 2 minutes, a student jumps off a desk and breaks their arm. Is that teacher liable for an intentional tort, or is this considered negligence? What's the actual legal distinction there? It's negligence. An intentional tort would be a deliberate harmful act, like assault. Negligence, on the other hand, is a failure to exercise care. It's failing to do something you definitely should have done. When courts look at these cases, they use something called the reasonably prudent person standard. They basically ask, what would a reasonable, careful educator have done in this exact situation? Well, a reasonable educator wouldn't leave a room full of kids totally unsupervised. As a principal, reminding your teachers that active supervision is literally their ultimate legal defense is one of the most important things you can do. Just to wrap up the legal side, let's briefly touch on the Equal Access Act and mandatory reporting. If your school creates an open forum by allowing non-curricular clubs, like a chess club or a coding club, you cannot deny access to a student-led religious club just because of their beliefs. Equal access means equal access. Also, Title IX legally protects your students and staff from any form of sex-based discrimination. And please never forget this. As a Florida educator, you are a mandatory reporter. If you even suspect child abuse, abandonment, or neglect, you don't investigate it yourself. You are legally obligated to report it immediately. And that brings us to the end of our explainer. I want to leave you with one final kind of provocative question to think about. Are you ready to lead, not just by strictly following the letter of the law, but by making ethical decisions that truly protect and empower your entire school community? Legal compliance, that's just the baseline. Creating a culture of absolute trust and fairness, now that is true leadership. Thank you so much for joining me for this mentorship session. Best of luck on the FELE, and honestly, even more importantly, best of luck on your journey to becoming a transformative school leader. You're going to be great.